Hello and welcome to Addicted to Lacrosse, Season 3, Episode 7. Today is Monday, February 15th, 2016. My name is Graham Perro. With me, as usual, are Tyler Fitch and Melissa Daphne. Melissa is still having some video issues, so we'll be able to hear her but not see her. Hopefully that's fixed next week. What do we have to talk about today? A couple of roster moves made by particularly the Stealth and the Rock. We had a trade from the Knighthawks to the Black Wolves. And then we had a bunch of interesting games this weekend, including two really exciting overtime games. So we'll get to those in a few minutes. First of all, Tyler Richards is an NLL player once again. So last week we talked about the fact that Richards was re-added to the Stealth, or sorry, moved to the active roster evaluation list, and then was released by the Stealth. So I guess we assumed they looked at him and said, yeah, we'd rather not do this, or you're not in good enough shape, or whatever it was, and they released him. And then a couple of days later, or might even been the next day, they signed him to a contract and released Chris Levis. And Richards actually made it to the floor on Saturday in the Rochester game, though he didn't actually face any shots. The ball was never even in that half of the floor while he was on the floor for 10 or 12 seconds or something. So didn't really come into play. But he is back on the roster. So that's interesting. I wrote an article on my blog on Saturday and posted it, got some good feedback about the fact that I was a little nervous about this, and we talked about this last week. Just the fact that it was concussion related, it wasn't just a knee injury that's gotten better or an elbow injury or something. Concussion injuries don't heal the same way. You can't just say I'm better now and I'm at no further risk of a concussion than anybody else, because it's just not the way it goes. So I was a little nervous about that. And like I said, we talked about it last week. Guys, do you have any thoughts? Melissa, we'll start with you.
You know, I was really surprised to hear about this. Of course, I'm kind of bummed because I liked Chris Levis, but I also know he wasn't the player that he used to be. And like you said, with the concussions, that's just not something you mess with. You really got to think long term with concussions, not short term. And if you're quitting because of concussions, that's actually a pretty big deal. So, like you said, it's not, well, this was kind of bothering me and now it's not, so I'm going to go ahead and play again. So it's very surprising. We'll have to see if he really was suffering from concussions. If he does take a few shots off the face mask, is that going to make him change his mind very quickly? I mean, obviously he's probably taken some in practice, but that can still be different than a game situation. I really do kind of worry about the long-term ramifications. What do you think, Tyler?
Yeah, I spent all morning downstairs laying on the couch with my eyes closed because I had a migraine this morning because I didn't sleep well, and I don't want that to be Tyler's future. But he's changed up a lot of things. First of all, so you listen to the Stealth Classified podcast from this weekend. They had a good interview with him. He retired last spring, but then did a bunch of research and feels that after talking to his doctors and researching it, he's not in a terrible place as far as, like, he's not currently having any symptoms or anything. He's switching up to the away from his Cascade field lacrosse helmet into one of the goalie helmets he's never really worn before. He already took a shot off the face mask from Tyler Garrison and got that out of the way, I guess. And he's back. So he's looking forward to playing, but he knows he's going to be, his role's maturing. He's going to be more playing the role that Roik played to him as he was coming in when he was the young guy, and passing on some of those experiences and knowledge will be very good for Penny, and Penny's still number one. So that's how that's going right now. I will give him compliments on one of the greatest tweets I've ever seen in my life. When he came back, he put up the picture of Brett Favre, and just said, "I don't always retire, but when I do, I don't." And that was absolutely hilarious. I think there's the risk that he's playing again, but he's better than Levis. So if we get in the Stealth get in a situation where they need the backup to come in and make a difference, I expect him to make a bigger difference in those moments. And that's my thoughts there.
Yeah, one thing I want to also mention, and I said this in my article as well, that Richards was never told by his doctors that he should retire. It was never recommended to him. Like, obviously the option is always there, and you always hear from players saying, "Well, I didn't want to retire, but my doctor said I should." That was not the case with Richards. He sort of did that preemptively, and so maybe he did the research and found that that was a little premature. He probably didn't need to. And so, yeah, so I hope all of our concerns are misplaced and he plays another 10 years, and that'll be great. So, so good luck to Tyler. Moving on, the Toronto Rock made a couple of roster moves, not unsurprisingly given their start, and I would not be surprised to see a few more this week. Now, not that I have any idea what they would be, but in any case, Josh Sanderson obviously returning to the lineup was the big one. And we knew that was going to happen last week. The other moves that were made were Jesse Gamble and Scott Johnson returning to the roster, and the Rock had to put Kevin Ross and Luke Magnan on the practice roster, and that's kind of disappointing because I kind of like the grit that Kevin Ross brings to the offense. And Luke Magnan was I thought was a pretty good rookie defender. He was I liked the way he looked in the few games that he played. A bit of a transition guy as well. But if you're looking for speed and grit, Jesse Gamble and Scott Johnson certainly bring that, as well as a little more experience than Magnan anyway. So as a Rock fan, I'm glad to have Gamble and Johnson back on the roster, though Johnson was a healthy scratch on Sunday. But Josh Sanderson obviously was the bigger move this week, and he played on Sunday and had a goal and a couple of assists. But we'll get to the Toronto game later. Another move that the Knighthawks made was to trade Jordan Hall, I want to say back to the Black Wolves. He never actually played for the Black Wolves, but he played for the Philadelphia Wings for a couple of years. And in return, the Knighthawks got Quinn Powless and Mike Manley. So not a blockbuster deal, but Jordan Hall's a pretty solid player, so sending him down to play with Sean Evans and Kevin Crowley on the offense there is a pretty good deal for the Black Wolves. And Quinn Powless, I've heard a lot of good things about him. He's got a lot of upside, young player, and he's obviously familiar with the Knighthawks and many of the players on the Knighthawks anyway. And I think Kurt Stiers was saying that he's watched Powless play since he was born, basically. So he's obviously familiar with what Powless can bring to the table, and yeah, so that's a pretty interesting deal for the Knighthawks. Any thoughts about that one, guys?
Yeah. As I was looking at this one, sometimes it's obvious, like the Stealth traded for Garrett Billings. The Roughnecks traded away Sean Evans because it's what was needed. Here, I can't tell who initiated what. Both teams are kind of playing 500 ball, and so I think maybe Jordan Hall wanted out of Rochester to get, maybe something was going on there where either chemistry-wise or work-wise going to England was better or something. Rochester's defense hadn't looked awesome in the couple of games they had lost, so maybe they were going after Manley and bringing in Powless. Maybe they initiated it, and the cost was a 2-for-1, and they had to give up Hall, and they didn't want to. It's kind of a tough read on this one. Usually there's like a simple driving factor in a lot of NL trades, but this one kind of surprised me. What do you think, Melissa?
I was definitely surprised to hear about this. I mean, that's pretty big. So I'll be curious to see what the impact actually will be.
So Hall played for the Knighthawks for a couple of years, and then on the Wings for a couple of years, and then spent last year on the Knighthawks, and obviously half of this season on the Knighthawks, and he's back in the the Wings organization now. And he played on Sunday as well, and I don't remember how well he did, but we will get to that
He had
in
a
a few
couple
minutes.
goals. He did all right. He was ready to go. Well, he had at least one goal.
Paulus, I believe, was a healthy scratch in the Rochester game, so they probably.
I don't remember Manley's name getting called either, but defenders don't always get that recognition.
You don't necessarily hear their names quite as much, especially if they're having a good game, as it seems. If they screw up a lot, you hear their name, and you don't want to. Speaking of games, one Thursday night game this week, which is odd. And I don't know if Melissa, if you were able to be there in Colorado, but 10,000 people as the recorded attendance, which is pretty low for Colorado, but pretty awesome for a Thursday night game. So that wasn't bad. Colorado beat the Saskatchewan Rush 9-7. Callum Crawford led the team in scoring in this game. He actually led the team in scoring in the other game that they played this weekend as well. How good an offense do you have when Adam Jones is your third highest scorer? I didn't see much of this game. I saw bits of it on TV, mostly the second half. But Melissa, I want to see what your thoughts were.
Unfortunately, I was only able to see the first half of this, and since it was a Thursday night game, I was not able to see it live. I'm actually amazed to hear that there was even 10,000 people there, but that still makes me wonder if people actually traded their tickets in and whether that was accurate. The stadium on the video looks just empty, so I really don't know who thought it was a good idea to do that. But the game itself was pretty exciting. The Rush were definitely pushing the Mammoth hard, and the fact that the score was so low scoring when we've been seeing a lot of 16 and 20 goal games, to see them not even break into the double digits was surprising. And like you said, Adam Jones, I don't even know if he played. I thought he was a healthy scratch.
Yeah, he didn't play Thursday.
Okay, yeah, I didn't think he did. I thought he was a healthy scratch. So yeah, to not have him in the lineup, and you're still having 9 goals up against a goalie like Bolt, that's pretty dang good. John Grant Jr. obviously left his mark. Let's see, Eli McLaughlin had a couple, so it was nice because it was spread out. And I think the Rush were doing a really good job on defense. Obviously, I can only speak to the first half, and the game was definitely very tight and back and forth. Although it was also mentioned by the announcers that Jamie Lincoln was a healthy scratch, and that's the first I actually had heard that he'd even been signed again with the Mammoth. So that was kind of a surprise to me. But it sounds like Ward was just phenomenal in net the whole night, and so that was really exciting to hear, because he's definitely struggled a little bit, whether that was due to his injury and it just not quite healing previously. It's good to see him back on his mark. Did you see any of this one, Tyler?
Yeah, I missed it night of, but I was able to go back and watch it on Friday. Great defensive battle. I think Callum Crawford is amazing in the way he's meshed with a whole new team coming as a free agent. Second leading scorer in the league. Dane Smith on a lot higher points per game average, like significantly higher. He's got 1 more point, 2 less games. But I think Callum's a top candidate for like league MVP at this point early in the season, and for players coming into a new team, that's pretty amazing to have the performance he's doing. Adam Jones missing the game it was Thursday, and he probably couldn't make it. But he's got this streak of games scoring goals in the regular season, and apparently it's still going even though he totally skipped a game. I guess because he didn't dress, it didn't affect his streak, which seems lame for a streak in some sense. Like, he scored a goal in every game that he shows up to. Well, how about he scores a goal in every game and gets there? But Thursday night games, the league kind of worked him over on that one, and it didn't happen. He wasn't there. So I don't know. I enjoyed watching it. The Mammoth defense was incredible. That rush team can score goals, but they held them to 7, and it was a great outing and fun to watch.
Yeah, I have to agree. Crawford is an early candidate for MVP. Obviously, we're still pretty early in the season, and you've got guys like Dane Smith having an outstanding year, and Sean Evans is likely one of those guys who will be in the top 5 for the next 10 years. Um, but considering the Mammoth got him for free from the Swarm, that was unbelievable. I mean, I imagine any GM worth anything could have gotten a fair amount for Callum Crawford. So why you just let him walk as a free agent, I do not understand at all. So good job by the Mammoth to grab him and make everybody forget entirely about Drew Westerveld, who just isn't playing this year at all. I believe he had work commitments. I think we talked about this at the beginning of the season. But considering the offense that the Mammoth have right now, I don't think they're missing them all that much.
Yeah, Callum Crawford is just doing phenomenal. I think we'll be talking a little bit more about him in the Calgary, Colorado game, because in this game he only had 1 goal, 3 assists, but he was definitely racking up some numbers against Calgary.
All right. Actually, why don't we go to that one next, seeing as we were just talking about it. Where did it go? I wasn't able to see this one. This was on TSN Go, and I won't go into that whole rant as I do frequently. Suffice to say, I wasn't able to watch it, but from the sounds of things, a lot of people weren't able to watch it because the TSN Go thing was showing a hockey game, I think, for most of the first half. And it looks like, Melissa, you were trying to watch it and were able to watch some of it, but ran into some problems as well.
Yeah, it was actually kind of good to talk to you guys about this and find out that, oh, there actually were issues, because as I'm watching it, you start it and it's like, okay, it's a DU Notre Dame hockey game. Oh, wait, no, it's an NBA game. No, it's a hockey game. Oh, no, there's some lacrosse. Oh, no, it's basketball, hockey. Oh, there we go. And then we have the game. And it's starting in the third quarter. So it was really kind of crazy. I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to watch any of the game at that point. So I only got to see the second half. So I have to rely on the score sheet for some of it. I think it's interesting to note that each team had a completely scoreless quarter. Colorado was scoreless in the first, and so Calgary had a 3-0 lead. And then at halftime, Colorado had 2 goals in the third, and Calgary went nothing. And then Colorado just opened it up in the fourth, and Calgary could not seem to stop them. And so we had a really big score, 13-8 final, but until the fourth quarter, it was actually pretty close. It was like 7-5. So it was well within Calgary's reach, but the fact they went scoreless in that third really, really hurt them. But Callum Crawford was just all over the place. He had 3 goals and 5 assists for 8 points on the night. So going back to the discussion we were just having about whether or not he's a potential MVP candidate, I think we're definitely starting to make a very strong case. And it's really interesting sometimes how you have a player who is really good on one team or is a good player that maybe struggles on another team, and then they just get put in the right situation, and all of a sudden they just seemed like they come out of nowhere. And he seems to be having a little bit of that kind of a season where I think he just wasn't playing as well as he might have been with the Swarm, and so they let him walk. And it didn't seem like there was a whole lot of teams trying to sign him. Maybe that was just the perception, but it didn't seem like he was high on everyone's list, and it almost seems like Colorado just kind of snuck him out from everybody, and he's just really thriving in this lineup. And I'm really excited to see what he's going to do with the rest of the season. Did you see any of this one, Tyler?
Yep, I was able to. Came on because of time zones after the stealth game, and I switched over after the stealth game and went right in through technical difficulties and then watched the second half. So the part I missed, I would have missed live, but I can't watch it on the replay either, which is a bummer. Really impressive cap to the weekend for Colorado to go on the road after playing a game already and get a pretty dominating victory in Calgary. So they started off 4-0, had a little hiccup there, and then came out with an incredible weekend. And Callum Crawford's goal in the fourth quarter, I don't know if it was his first or second one of the fourth, he had two within 23 seconds of each other. And put this little twister move while jumping across the crease was just incredible. Had the goalie lean in fully this way and just brought the stick across, dunked it. It was phenomenal. I love seeing Calgary lose with the stealth loss. That was good. One of their young kids, Riley O'Connor, finally got his first goal several games into the season. He'd been a little, snake bit on the scoring front. It's kind of he was like one of my individual storylines. Like, wow, they got this kid who's playing forward and can't score a goal no matter what, but he finally got there in the fourth quarter. And I don't know, not too many other thoughts there. Another great effort by the Mammoth. Very impressive. When they're clicking, they're top notch right now. They'll definitely in front to win the West, and if you get into a little playoff series with them and maybe the Rush, it could be a very, very good battle.
Yeah, it looks like the Colorado offense certainly wasn't clicking as well as it had in the first 2 or 3 games when they were scoring 16 and 17 goals. But if you only allow the Rush to score 7 and the Roughnecks to score 8, you don't need 17 goals. They managed to win with 9 and 13. And from the sounds of things, Dylan Ward is I guess he was not doing great in the first few games. Like, they were scoring a bunch of goals, but they were allowing a lot. But the last couple, obviously, like I said, he's only allowed 15 goals in these 2 games. The Mammoth are certainly looks like they're the team to beat in the West right now. And the fact that we're not saying that about the Rush for the first time in about 3 years is pretty impressive. So good on you, Mammoth.
Well, and just to kind of add to that, I think part of it is also that the Mammoths, at least in these 2 games, the Mammoths' defense came together a little bit better, whereas in some of the games they were really hanging the goalie out to dry and not giving them any support whatsoever. And the defense was really crumbling in front of some of those offenses. So I think the fact that the Mammoth defense played pretty well in both these games really was a huge bolster for Ward and helped him shine, because he wasn't facing nearly the number of shots or the number of quality shots. They were really limiting some of those shots, although I know Mark Matthews got a few off in this most recent game.
Which is kind of a good segue into the Vancouver-Rochester game. This was a really exciting one. And the reason I talk about the goaltending as a segue is I thought it was a little odd that at the end of the game, you think, we have Matt Vince didn't play very well, so Angus Goodleaf came in, and he played really well. And I thought Eric Penny played really well. And yet there were 31 goals scored in this game. It did look to me like the goaltending was there, the defense wasn't. And if you allow that many shots or that many good shots, doesn't matter how good a night the goalie's having, they're going to let a bunch of them in. So a lot of those goals, I wouldn't hang on the goaltending and hang more on the lack of defense. But in any case, Vancouver led this game for over 45 minutes, so they were dominant for most of the game. Rochester never gave up. I meant to look. They were down by 5, I think, at one point.
Yeah, it was 8-3 when Vince got pulled in the second quarter.
Yep. And then Rochester went on to score the next 4 goals, got it right back to within 1. And then they tied it up midway through the third. They actually took a lead for a little while. Then Vancouver took it back, and then it just went back and forth from there. And from that point on, it was it was definitely anybody's game. There was no way you could say, okay, well, Vancouver had all the momentum. Well, by that point, the momentum was long gone. So could have gone either way, and it came right down to the end. And there must have been 3 or 4 times where I thought, okay, that's it. That's the game winner right there. and then somebody else scored, and then okay, well that's the game winner, and oh no, now it's tied, we're going overtime, and then Dan Dawson scored with less than a minute left. Okay, there's your game winner. Nope, Reese Dutch scores 20 seconds after that and ties it up. And then we went to overtime, and we waited 7 minutes. So there were just goals all over the place at the end of the fourth quarter, and then we waited 7 minutes for another one. And the thing I think that was most surprising about this was the NLL tweeting shortly after this game ended, after Cody Jamieson scored the winner, that was only the second overtime goal of his career. He's in the middle of his 6th season. He's got 176 career goals as of now, and only 2 in overtime. That seemed unbelievable to me, considering how clutch we know he is. I mean, he shows up in the Moneyballers column all the time. Tyler, you were mentioning last week that if you had, if 10 seconds left in the game and you had one person to take a shot, you'd give it to him. So the fact that he's only had 2 OT goals in his career seemed pretty surprising to me.
Yeah,
Tyler, what do you think?
Yeah, I had the same feeling when I saw that stat. Maybe he had a lot of fourth quarter winners, or he's also surrounded by talent so that he can get a lot of assists. Vitarelli's had a lot of OT goals, I think. Maybe because Jammer, Cody Jamieson's drawing the main defenders. But just thinking about this game again, I can barely breathe. It was incredible second half. Stealth got out to early lead, playing phenomenal. Like I said, it was 8-3 before they pulled Vince, and then Rochester as a whole responded to the goalie being pulled, which is sometimes what the thing that the coaches are going for. Not necessarily that they need the goalie change, but they need the whole team to respond. And the defense locked things down. Stealth didn't score the rest of that second quarter. The offense came to life a little bit and got 3 goals. Between Vince coming out and 35 seconds later, they had 2 more goals. Less than 2 minutes later, they had 3 goals. So Vince came out, the offense came to life, and the defense started locking down the Stealth. It was a big momentum change to get that switch. But yeah, then it led to that close second half. As soon as like it went to the scoring, it was incredible. I was so nervous the whole time. Incredibly fun to watch. I continued to despise Dan Dawson and always think that he's the one player that I never want to go against for the Stealth. And he got that, what would have been maybe the game-winning goal with 40 seconds left in the game. I was like, Dan Dawson, always Dan Dawson. But Reese sent it to overtime, thankfully, and got another 7 minutes and 15 seconds of free lacrosse. I was just sitting there just like, what's going to happen? I can't believe it. So amazing. Fun game to watch. Sucks for the Stealth to lose, but I imagine it was, as far as character building and road trip experience, the team will be better coming out of all that. And look forward to seeing them at home without having to make the big cross-country trip and being rested and taken out on, I think, Calgary this next weekend. Any thoughts on this one, Melissa?
Unfortunately, no, I didn't get to see this one, but it sounds like it was such an exciting game. I mean, anytime a game goes down to overtime, it was good. And just looking at how the score was each quarter, it just seems like it was one of those back and forth games the entire game that you're just like, oh man, oh there's another one, and oh who's gonna win, and you just have no idea. So it really sounds like an exciting game. I wish this one would have been on ESPN and not just Fox. Thanks, NLL. I'll be snarky some more. I'm a little frustrated at what little games I'm able to watch this season.
Yeah, I was actually looking forward to watching the Colorado-Calgary game this afternoon because I had some time, but it was on Fox, so that was not possible. And then there's the other game that was on TSN Go, which I can't watch live, and it turns out I can't watch on replay either. So I was out of luck today as well. Move on to Buffalo, Georgia. And I did not see this one either because I was watching the Toronto-New England game. But I meant to look at this. Yeah, that was kind of back and forth in the first. Not a lot happened. There was only 5 goals. And then Buffalo scored 8 straight, and we're leading 10-2, barely halfway through the second quarter, and it was pretty much over from there. I mean, we've seen some pretty impressive comebacks, even this year, but it's certainly in previous years. But that was not to be in this case. The Bandits jumped out to a 9-goal lead into the third. Georgia came back with 4 straight, and then Buffalo scored 6 out of 7, and we're leading by as many as 10 at one point. Georgia got a few in, as they say, garbage time, but this was certainly a Bandits victory all over the place. Dane Smith, 13 points, which is the highest of any player in any game, any single game since 2012 when Garrett Billings scored 15 against Buffalo. Though the 13 has been tied by Sean Evans and Josh Sanderson. So pretty impressive numbers from Dane Smith, as we've been saying all season. 9 points in Ryan Benesh's return after missing a game last week. Yeah, I imagine this was probably pretty exciting game for a while, and then not so much. I tend to not be a big fan of the blowouts because it seems like both teams end up saying, okay, this one's over, can we just move on? Obviously, the losing team wants to get it over, but a lot of times it looks like the winning team is like, okay, we're starting to get a little uncomfortable continually scoring here. We should probably just dial it back. And then it makes for boring lacrosse, so nobody wants to watch that. So, Tyler, did you see this one?
Yeah, I was able to watch this yesterday, and I don't know the reasoning behind Swan coach Ed Camo switching up goalies. Brody McDonald's been playing great the last few games. He had the hot hand, but he gave Zach Higgins the start, and I think he should have pulled him after the 5th goal instead of the 8th or 10th goal, whatever it was. I think the 8th goal. It was not he didn't have it, as they say, and the Swarm got down early and couldn't recover, and the Bandits felt like everything was going right and just laid into them and played a game on Sunday and got a football score out of this thing. It was amazing. That's a lot of goals. I will say the winners for the week, though, Thompson Brothers. They have their awesome new shoe out from Nike now. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend anybody pick it up. It's got a great little raised leather feel to it and those little grooves. Beautiful shoe. Definitely something I think you should all check out if you're in the market. Proud. Oh, it's even got the little T. It's very specific. It's the Thompson shoe. And I don't know. It was. Everything went right for the Bandits. Home game for the Swarm on a Sunday, Valentine's Day, pretty low attendance. Team got blown out. Hopefully it doesn't hurt them overall. They've been doing, I don't know, they haven't done as well as the Rush with numbers since their opening game, but this one might hurt them. We'll see how it goes. That's my thoughts. How about you, Melissa, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, unfortunately, another one I don't have much to add to, but I definitely agree with Graham that it is kind of frustrating as a fan when you see these blowouts, and you feel really bad for the teams because you're like not knowing why they're not showing up, or if they are just having a bad night. And I agree, it's kind of odd to see something that looks more like a football score. I just really can't add much to this. You know, Buffalo's definitely been playing really strong this season, and maybe it's because they actually have less penalties. I don't know. They're definitely playing really well, and obviously they were just overpowered the Swarm. But with it being a holiday and a Sunday, I don't know what other issues there might have been that affected the Swarm. It's definitely kind of a bummer to see such a lopsided score, especially since the Swarm have been playing pretty well.
Yeah, I'm hoping the fact that it was a Sunday afternoon was the prime factor in their low attendance. Now they reported 4,971. I've heard that there might have been 2,000 people in the arena, so that's pretty scary. And the fact that they got blown out, like Tyler said, is is not going to help that, I don't think. But hopefully, if they're strong enough for the rest of the season, I haven't looked at their schedule, and hopefully they don't have any more Sunday afternoon games because those are killers, and hopefully they don't have any Thursday evening games because those aren't great either. The Philadelphia Wings even tried like a Friday morning game, like I think it was a 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. or some crazy thing a couple of years ago, and I think they got about 9 people at that game. There are probably more people on the floor than in the stands. So hopefully they can get a better schedule for the rest of the season and in future seasons, and that would allow them to have future seasons. And full disclosure, we did not get paid for the Thompson Brothers shoe commercial that just happened a few minutes ago. But if the Thompson Brothers want to contact us, feedback at addictedtolacrosse.com. That'd be great. Thanks.
I'm just not sharing the check.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I didn't tell you.
Maybe I should say we didn't get paid for that commercial, but Tyler might have. The last game of the weekend was kind of similar, I thought, to the Rochester-Vancouver game, in that one team led for 45 minutes, and then the other team came back, never gave up. And then it was tied a number of times. Each team grabbed a lead for a very short time in the fourth quarter. There were a couple of goals scored with less than a minute left, and then the wrong team won in overtime because they screwed that up. Yeah, this kind of looked for a while like it was going to be a New England all the way kind of thing. I don't think they had as big a lead as Rochester had. No, New England never had a lead bigger than 3, it doesn't look like. Nope. But it did kind of look a few times like, okay, that's going to break the floodgates open. But to their credit, the Rock came back most of the time within a minute or two. They would score another goal. So it does kind of look like the Rock have got their offensive thing together. It's too bad that their defense just vanished entirely at that point. Because when you score 17 goals in one game and 16 in the next, you probably should win at least one of them, shouldn't you? Into the third quarter, Sean Evans had a natural hat trick in a little over 2 minutes. It's not a sock trick in 5 minutes like Zach Greer did last week or 2 weeks ago, but it's still not bad. And then, like I said, same as the Rochester game, it came down to Toronto taking a lead with 5 minutes left, New England tying it up, Toronto taking a lead with 19 seconds left, which you'd think is usually enough to do it. But Sean Evans said no, and he scored with 7 seconds left on the clock. And we went to overtime, and that took less than a minute for Kyle Buchanan to finish that one. And put Toronto at 0-6. So I think we said last week that 0-5 was their worst ever start. So they've set a new record, so hooray. Yeah, what more can we say about this one? The goaltending wasn't great, but I certainly, similar to the other game, I wouldn't put all of this on Miller. He let in a few softies here and there for sure, but there just seemed to be Black Wolves on the doorstep far too often. Or now it's tough because you can't just usually leave one person covering somebody like Sean Evans. You almost have to double team him. And if you have to double team him and you're playing 5-on-5, somebody else is going to be open, and that happened an awful lot. So yeah, I don't know what more to say about that. The offense seems to have sorted itself out. The defense have not. We were questioning the move of firing the defensive coach last week when they were having offensive problems, but maybe that turned out to be the right move, except it doesn't actually fix anything yet. Yeah, so that was a really exciting game to watch. Obviously, as a Rock fan, I was disappointed by the outcome, but it was certainly a lot of fun to watch, particularly in the fourth. Yeah, Melissa, did you see this one?
I didn't see this one, but I do have a question for you. With the Rock going 0-6, it's definitely it's hard to be a fan right now. But did this game actually give you hope going into this next weekend, or are you kind of getting a little more grumbly that, yeah, this is just going to be the same thing next week?
Actually, I think both of these two losses, give the most recent two losses, gave me a little bit of hope in that in both games, they were losing for most of it. It could have been a runaway game. The other team scored a zillion goals. But in both cases, the team never gave up. They kept pressing. They kept scoring. So like we said, the offensive problem seems to have been solved. Um, the first few games, they just really looked bad. The defense was okay. The goaltending was okay. The offense looked just terrible. Whereas in this one, the defense certainly looked shaky, but I didn't think they looked really, really bad. So it's kind of like, I guess, kind of like the Roughnecks last year. They were 0-6, but they were losing close games. I think at least 2 of those 6 games were in overtime. I think they got blown out in one of them, but they were always sort of in it. And I remember saying that they were probably the best 0-6 team you'll ever see. And Toronto's the last couple of games have looked a little more like that, in that they haven't looked terrible for the most part, but not good enough to win. But the holy crap, do these guys look bad stuff that we saw in the first few games has seemed to go away. Tyler, did you see this one?
Yeah, as I had to switch back and forth as it was at the same time as the game down south, Georgia and Buffalo. But it was more entertaining. I actually switched to this game once it got going and Buffalo pulled away. It's fun to watch a close battle that goes to OT. I got my Rock jersey on today because once you hit 0-6, you start needing some sympathy. It's 0-5, you're not the worst start ever for a team that was in championships before, but now they're tied with it, and it's getting a little sad. They made changes to get ready for this. They had a week to get ready for this, and they still lost. So they're going to be a frustrated bunch of players there, and I don't know what's next for them. We'll have to see. I'm not sure what they could do differently. They had the best offensive players available. And everybody was kind of scoring some goals, but it just wasn't quite enough. We'll see what happens going forward.
Well, this 0-6 start actually kind of reminds me of the Albany attack when I think it was their last season, where they had a just completely losing record. But when you looked at their scores, they lost this one in overtime. They lost this one by 1 goal in the fourth. They lost this one by 2 goals. This one was overtime. And they were really in every single game, but when you just looked at their record, it looked like they were the worst team ever.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of, like I said, the Roughnecks last year, the Rock this year. The Roughnecks made it to the West Final last year, as a couple people have pointed out on Twitter today. So it's not out of the question that the Rock still make the playoffs, but they're going to have to turn things around pretty quick because at this point they're I guess 12-6 is still possible, but that seems unlikely. But you want to be at least 500 to have a chance to make the playoffs, and so they're going to have to really step things up ASAP to get there. And my worry is, I didn't actually hear what he said, but Jamie Dowk was interviewed after the game and said, from what I read, said something to the effect of, the players are going to have to be accountable, sort of thing. And I'm hoping that doesn't mean that's it. I'm pissed off. I'm trading Colin Doyle. I'm trading Steph LeBlanc. I'm trading Brett Hickey. If those kind of things happen, then we're in deep trouble. So I'm hoping that Dowd can wait until he calms down a little bit after the loss and make moves that make sense if those moves need to be made. But don't just make moves for the sake of making moves, as we said a couple weeks ago when Ladouceur was fired.
Of all the teams in the NLL, they are the best positioned to pull active players out of CLAX and give them promotion to the big leagues. So if there's defenders ready and waiting to step up, the Rock might be looking.
Well, but even for as bad as the Rock are playing right now, it's not like the entire season is sabotaged. I mean, Georgia and Rochester only have 3 wins, so it's not like at this point they're super far behind. But yeah, they definitely need to figure something out and start getting some wins under their belt. Otherwise, the season can just be written off. That's just going to be the way it is. And when the Mammoth were kind of going through this, it was very frustrating because they'd fix one thing and that didn't do it, and they'd do another, and then they started getting bigger and bigger shakeups, and it seemed like it actually was making the team worse. So I don't know that there's an easy answer, but they definitely need something soon.
Marissa and Jemmy from In Lacrosse We Trust posted, actually she tweeted something a week or two ago when I think the Rock were probably only 0-4 or 0-5 at the time, just saying the fact that a bunch of NLL players live in and around the Toronto area is a huge advantage to the Rock, because people like Brody Merrill and Brandon Miller and a bunch of people all say, I'm maybe getting to the end of my career. I don't particularly like the travel quite as much, so it'd be great if I could just play for the Rock, and half of the games of my season are at home. That'd be great. So they have their pick of the litter, basically, and any Toronto-based player would love to play here. The problem is, now that they might look and say, okay, well, we want to do a rebuild. Well, we can't get rid of Brody Merrill. We can't get rid of Brandon Miller. We can't get rid of Colin Doyle. We can't, there's all these Toronto-based players that may not want to be traded anywhere else. We don't particularly want to just release them, so we're kind of stuck with them. So it's almost like there's a big advantage to having that, but there's a kind of a disadvantage as well. And if the Rock are going to be making trades or making changes, you got to look, okay, Doyle's not going anywhere. Sanderson's not going anywhere. Like I said, Merrill and Miller aren't going anywhere. There's a whole bunch of Toronto-based people who may not want to be traded anywhere else, so they may have limited options as to what they do.
Yeah, I think any team receiving the call from Dawick and asking for a player is like, is that guy really going to show up if I say yes? And odds are low.
And we've certainly seen that those kind of trades happen before. I mean, actually, the Rock were on the losing end of that this year with Mike Grimes. They received him from Georgia, might have been Minnesota at the time, and then it turned out he wasn't able to play. So he's been not playing this year at all.
Well, then adding on to that, I mean, obviously you have the issue of if the player's even going to show up. But some of these teams are really starting to click, so a lot of the teams aren't going to want to even make trades because they're not going to want to shake up what is seemingly starting to work.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to look at another team that's not doing well and try to trade with them. But if they're and just hoping that the reason that they're not doing well is a chemistry thing or something to that effect. Sometimes, as we've seen, players just don't play very well in one place and they get moved and they suddenly become all-stars. Yeah, so I don't know what the Rock has planned or if they have anything planned at all, but yeah, next week's show might be interesting when we talk about what happened there. So I guess that's it for the games of the week. I had a bit of a rant that I was going to go on about the New England game. I think I'll skip that for now, maybe move that to next week. Somebody was talking about team penalties. Who was...
I added
that to our list. Was that yours?
That was me. In the Thursday night game, they threw up this breakdown of all the team penalties so far this season, and I thought it was very interesting because part of it, when you look at the records, then it kind of makes you wonder if there's some correlation there. And it was very surprising to see that Buffalo was actually at the bottom, whereas Buffalo is usually known as being a very heavy penalty team. So Vancouver is listed at number 1, and unfortunately I didn't pull the records beforehand since I just watched the game afterwards. It was played, and Vancouver had 5 games played and 129 penalty minutes, averaging 25.8 over the games, and they have now a 2-4 record. Toronto at 0-6 was close second with 112 penalty minutes and averaging 22.4. So it was very interesting that the bottom two teams are also the top two in the penalty. So you could kind of argue that there's some frustration there, and they're probably taking out a little bit. But then you have the Rush, who typically are pretty solid, and they've been playing pretty well this season. They have a couple losses, but they've played 4 games, and they have 80 penalty minutes, which is actually pretty low, but they're averaging 20 per game. And then Calgary and Georgia are both at 6 games with 110 penalty minutes and an 18.33 average, and they're both 3-4. So that was kind of interesting. And then you have New England, Rochester, Buffalo, and Colorado rounding out the bottom 4. But what's interesting to me is Rochester only has 47 penalty minutes total, Buffalo 57, and Colorado 60. So those are your bottom 3 and really low average penalty minutes. And Buffalo, like I said, is known for almost being a penalty-heavy team. So it looks like they've made some serious changes this season. And with them being kind of in second place in the East, it looks like it's working. You guys have any thoughts on any of that?
It's hard to prove a statement like this, but I think a couple of times those stealth penalties, especially the game in Calgary 2 weeks ago, Matt Beers took some penalties that were just terrible choices or mind laps or whatever it was that put the Roughnecks on power play, and they won the game, close game. The game in Rochester Saturday night in the fourth quarter. The young kid for the Stealth, Ryan Wagner, Nighthawks player scores. Wagner's kind of trailing the play, and the guy goes down, trips on his feet, and in order to hold himself up, essentially cross-checks the guy. So if he put his hands to his side here, instead of cross-checking, maybe put his hand over here to hold himself up, it's not a cross-check, and they go in the power play and got a goal, and that one goal would have been all the difference in the game. So poorly timed penalties have definitely been hurting the Stealth this year in a lot of the games, and I would like to see them cut that out.
Yeah, and as we saw at the end of the Toronto game on the weekend, the same thing happened. They were, I don't remember if they had just taken the lead or if they had just tied it up or something. It was in the fourth quarter, and they took 2 penalties at the same time, giving New England a 5-on-3.
Yeah.
But now, to their credit, they killed off the 5-on-3 until they killed off the 5-on. Or they only allowed 1 goal in the 2 penalties anyway. But so their penalty killing did a decent job, but they were blatant penalties and really badly timed. But yeah, a couple of the Rock penalties that would have added to this total were after the first 2 or 3 games. There was some pushing and shoving very near the end of, I think, both of the first 2 games, if not the first 3 games, where, at 14:57 of the fourth quarter, they end up with a bunch of roughings and a bunch of misconducts and a bunch of fighting and things. So hopefully that's kind of skewing the numbers a little bit, and Toronto just isn't the penalty-heavy team that it kind of looks like they are from these numbers. But it certainly would be interesting to revisit these numbers near the end of the season when we've had a full season to look at.
Yeah, well, as we know, the penalties can definitely play havoc on some teams and really affect the score, because we've seen some teams that are really able to maximize being on the power play, whereas other teams, it doesn't seem to make any difference. So it is kind of skewed when you're just looking at a bunch of numbers and you really don't have the context for them. But the fact that some teams that are known to be a little more penalty heavier at the bottom, and some that typically have not been historically or closer to the top, I thought was really interesting. I think it's kind of amusing on Colorado's that of their 60 minutes, a lot of them are actually John Grant Jr. So, and to see that they're really only averaging 10 a game, it's also interesting. But too many penalties.
All right, we'll move on to our predictions. I'd kind of rather we skip this entirely, actually, since I only went 1 for 4 last week and I was an overtime goal away from over 5. So I got the Rochester game right, but that was it. Tyler and Melissa both went 3 and 2. So that brings our overall averages to Melissa still in the lead at 15 and 13. Tyler right behind her, well, a few games behind her at 11 and 17, and I'm one behind Tyler at 10 and 18. So since I actually haven't done my predictions for next week yet, I'll let you guys go first. So Melissa, since you're in first place, you seem to be perennially going first. So what do you think?
Yeah, it's kind of strange to be in the top still. I think with Buffalo and Toronto, I have to go with Buffalo. It just until Toronto really starts showing that they're breaking off this losing streak, they're just a poor bet. With Rochester and Saskatchewan, that one's a little tougher. I think both teams really have the potential to take that game, but I'm going to go with the West Coast and go with the Rush. Georgia and Buffalo, I think I'm going to play the odds and actually go with Georgia since Buffalo's playing back-to-back games. And Calgary and Vancouver is another toughie because those two always play really tough against one another. But I'm going to give it to Calgary. What about you, Tyler?
Alrighty. Buffalo at Toronto. I'm going to go with Buffalo until Toronto shows me something otherwise. Rochester at Saskatchewan. I'm picking the team from Saskatoon. I think they want to bounce back from that loss, and they've been doing great at home. I mean, they had opening loss aside, they're a good home team, home fans. It'll be a good match for them. Georgia going to Buffalo, rematch from the blowout this weekend. There's a chance Georgia just comes out completely better prepared, I guess. I don't know what exact terminology I'm looking for there, but I doubt it. I think Buffalo will be like, hey, we're at home. We steamrolled these guys last week. Not going to take them for granted, but we know we just play our game, and they can't stop us, so let's go do that again. And so I'll pick Buffalo there. The last game, Calgary at Vancouver, is a tough one. They great close battle 2 weeks ago when Stealth lost to the Mammoth and then came back 2 weeks later and played them. They learned from it and corrected the problems. So that's what I'm looking for again, is for the Stealth to learn from the problems they had before, which could be as simple as not taking the stupid penalties, and they'll be able to get the win at home and beat Calgary. So I'll pick Vancouver there. What do you got, Graham?
Well, I just went through mine, and it looks like they're the same as Tyler's, as it turns out. So I'm going with Buffalo against Toronto. I don't like doing this, but I kind of picked with my heart instead of my head last week, and said, yeah, not 100% sure Toronto's got it all solved, but I think they're going to break it. I don't think they can go 0-6. And they put up a good fight, but they lost. And like I said last week, if there was any other team, I would have gone against them. And I have to use my head this time and say, yeah, until they show that they can actually win something, then I'm gonna have to go against them. So I'm going with Buffalo, and hoping I'm wrong. Rochester, Saskatchewan. This should be a pretty good matchup. I agree with Tyler. I think Saskatchewan, I guess it is going to want to rebound from last week, and I'm going to go for the Rush on that one. Georgia, Buffalo. Yeah, and I waffled on this one a little bit as well. I thought about Georgia initially, thinking that they can kind of come back, but then I thought how badly the Bandits just manhandled them this past weekend, and I mean, we've certainly seen it in this league that two teams will play a game and one will just totally smoke the other, and then the next week the same two teams played overtime. So it's certainly possible for this one to come back, but I'm going to go with Buffalo on this one. Dane Smith is playing out of his mind, and Ryan Benesh is obviously still playing well, but he gets the benefit of Dane Smith playing out of his mind. So I'm going to go with the Bandits on that one. Calgary, Vancouver. This, I guess, is the same sort of Jekyll and Hyde thing we've talked about before. Which Vancouver team are you going to get? But the Stealth have been a little more consistent the last couple of games. Obviously, they lost this past week and won the week before, so not that way, but they still played well in both of those games. And so I think they played well at home against the Mammoth last week. And so I think they're going to continue that, and I'm going to go with the Stealth on that one. Yeah, I guess that's it for this week, unless you guys have anything else that you wanted to mention.
Buy your Thompson shoes at Nike.com.
I hope that the NLL learns from this, and please, 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 no more Thursday games.
And if we can add no more Sunday games and give us replays as well, that'd be just great. Yeah, I guess that's about it for this week. AddictedToLacrosse.com is where you will find all of our old episodes. If you want to get a hold of us for comments or questions, feel free. We are at Lax Podcast on Twitter and Lax Podcast on Facebook as well. Feedback at addictedtolacrosse.com if you want to email us questions or comments or sponsorship offers. That's about it. So this has been another episode of Addicted to Lacrosse. For Tyler and Melissa, I'm Graham. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.